Hello world! Curses of madness be upon you all, my friends. And speaking of curses, we really have to talk about the third issue of London Calling. This series has just continually disappointed me. Each issue gives me something that I really like, usually Iggy, and then it'll do something else that kind of just devalues the entire thing and kind of ruins the whole weight of the story for me. So, issue 3. I like that we brewed conflict between these two, you kind of had to make a story. But when it was as artificial as the end of chapter 2 made it, where Iggy was just assuming intent from Tracer after how thoughtful she'd shown herself to be about the human-Omnic divide, and death makes people emotional, obviously, but I don't know, kind of makes her seem ignorant or easily swayed by extremism when that's not a great way to paint this oppressed lower class. Yeah, certain ways you can take it, make it feel okay, make it feel like it's making a good point about how extreme circumstances affect people, but when I can't emotionally identify with it, when I can't understand why the changes in character have happened, as we'll come into, it means that I don't understand it. It means I can't empathize with it. It means it comes off as stupid rather than unfortunate. Yeah, Iggy and Tracer's conflict could have been made a whole lot more tangible, like over an actual thing, over an actual decision that Tracer made, or something that she did, not a misconception. And I kind of hope that this chapter was gonna, go back on that and point out that no, they do have a real conflict, and we'll see what happens there. Issue 3 of London Calling. My dad used to tell me that a soldier must know her enemy. Suggests her dad was in the forces as well? Interesting. After fighting with Overwatch, I understand justice, duty, honour. But I don't, and will probably never understand, why people like Widowmaker create chaos instead of fighting it. The equality post is here. It's the part of war that will never make sense to me. But maybe it's at the centre of the thing. Maybe I should understand it. That's actually kind of an interesting point. I like that she's at least thinking about it in that respect. And this whole maybe it's at the centre of the thing, relating back to Widowmaker. They gave her a bunch of extra voice lines recently. She's obviously very involved in this story. The museum fight is supposedly after this one, although that doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, something tells me the later issues, possibly the 4th and 5th, might involve Widowmaker somehow. Could be an expansion to her story as well, we'll have to see. Where's Tracer? This is Lizzie, incidentally, if I remember rightly. Let's get out of here. Ready? On me. Audio live, camera live. Today in the streets of London, an explosion and shots fired, resulting in the assassination of a major figure in the fight for equality. It just feels awkward to read between them. Why would Widowmaker kill Mondatta? Was she hired? If you know who Widowmaker is, and you know who Talon are, by who? I don't know, why is Tracer even assuming a further party in this? She knows who Widowmaker is, she knows who Talon are. Like, why is she not just instantly assuming that they have their own agenda? That feels really dumb to me. Was she hired? By who? This is a nice thing that I wish they actually kind of had explored more, especially from the Omnic side, as we'll see, because it might have actually given a lot more reasoning as to why everyone does what they do. This is definitely something that sounds like a war, or the start of one. That's annoying. Official police statement released just a minute ago states that Omnic leader Mondatta was shot and killed tonight by an unknown assailant. Before his tragic assassination, Mondatta was speaking to an audience of devotees, continuing his message of peace and harmony between humans and Omnics. Attendees reported hearing gunshots and at least one explosion prior to the shot that ultimately killed Mondatta. He died surrounded by security while standing only inches from his armoured vehicle. There are also reports that former members of Overwatch, including former Overwatch agent Tracer, may have had some connection to this tragedy. Is this the part? I think so. So Tracer's still actually getting them bits for the underground. You are not responsible for this. You weren't there. I could have... Lena, this is not your fault. Tracer's guilt, like her perception of guilt, makes sense, and it always has done. She could have saved him, but there was another person with intent in there. They bested you. That happens. you could have done more. Everybody could always have done more, but you were the only person actually doing anything, so, yeah. It's not her fault. It's Widowmaker's fault. Like, it's the people who wanted Mondatta's death's fault. Focusing on them is kind of a little more important, right? From every side. But how she feels about it, yeah, totally makes sense. In the same situation, I would still accept guilt. At least personally, right? They really need to work on how that transition does, because that makes the reading of this a little annoying and uncomfortable. How can he just be gone? It doesn't feel real. What's real is they killed him. Who killed him? A human, Lizzie. A human. Just this instant jump to extreme, to a perception that Iggy has been so, like, clearly and vocally against the whole time. And for it to be so stark and so clear and so reductive. Yes, it was a human. And if they actually explored the idea of why a human would have killed them, and who would have encouraged humans to kill each other, I get that Omnics see each other more as a collective, and they don't see they evidently don't see individualism as much, but ignoring individualism kind of defeats their whole point of being sentient. Ugh. A human, Lizzie. A human. And, like, going straight to they and making it an other thing when she was so vocally against them being so separate. We don't know. You said you saw Tracer falling. She wasn't shooting at Mondatta. You didn't see anyone firing. She did. She even in the last issue. Like, at the very end, she says Tracer blinked out of the way of the bullet that killed Mondatta. She knows this. She saw what was happening. She saw that Tracer was fighting somebody who then shot Mondatta. And she's assuming that Tracer... Be real, lady. Who else wanted him dead? Tracer wanted him dead? Come on, Iggy. Fine. Someone killed him, and Tracer let them. Oh, that wording. I fucking hate that wording. Because it implies intent. In a situation where there is no intent, we know that the intent is literally the opposite. So does Iggy. And it just makes her seem dumb. It doesn't make it seem like an emotional response. If Tracer had come to Iggy afterwards and revealed that, different to what we even knew, that, yeah, I knew that bullet would have hit him. I'm sorry I moved. That's an actual conflict. That's a decision that Tracer made that Iggy can actually get angry over. That's a tangible conflict. Why the fuck didn't you do that? Way to just devalue all of what this could have been about. Where the perception of Omnic's about death, which comes later in the thing, and the idea of self-sacrifice, which is obviously very important to Omnic's, given Aurora. If Tracer had been able to point out that for humans it's different, or that it's for nobody it's actually different, like, you've got to be a really particular person to throw yourself in front of a bullet for someone. Like, that's got to be a very particular situation, right? I ain't giving my life up just cause. Not that this is just cause, yeah, okay, saving a world spiritual leader that could have helped human Omnic equality along. But with the shot fired, even if Mondatta didn't die, this chaos would have happened. If Tracer had stayed in the way of the bullet, it's a fucking high caliber sniper rifle. It would have pierced straight through her and her Chronal Accelerator, utterly killing her and possibly just removing her from time again. And Mondatta still would have died. The bullet would have just gone straight through her and hit him. Like, there's not much of Tracer to shoot through. Like, Tracer staying in the way of the bullet actually does more detriment to the human Omnic cause. Even if they proclaim her as some sort of, like, human Omnic equality martyr afterwards, that she stayed in the way of the bullet and it didn't work, way to show the value of that. We are all one, we both died in the iris. Ugh. All of it could have been so much more tangible than this. It just now seems like, yeah, just an irrational emotional reaction that doesn't mean anything and possibly isn't really gonna go anywhere. They strike us down again and again. They tried to control us and they couldn't. Now they want to grind us into oblivion. They hide us because they know we are their end. They fear us because they know we are the future. We are the enlightened, not them. I say no more. Now, on a grander level, like, I like this speech. It makes a lot of sense for a perspective of Omnic's, but it kind of, again, it's just going into it's going into rhetoric. It's going into just like buzzwords and in and out groups. It's not actually doing what I would like to see in having some Omnics be there like, well, yeah, why? Who would employ an assassin to take out Mondatta? Is that the British government? Which would then tie pretty well into why they go rioting later, personally, for there to actually be a tangible reason as to why they are. It's not even rioting, it looks like peaceful protest until the fucking thing will come to this. It just kind of, I would have actually preferred to see Kace give a little more like actual reasoning, like into the situation and the politics of everything, to find like an actual determinate antagonist for them. That yes, they're protesting against the British government. Like yes, you can go on a protest march after people die in terrible circumstances, which obviously this is actually a pretty good representation of in its way. But it makes a lot more sense to have the protest, to have a cause that is understandable and logical. Like, say, marching against police brutality as a thing that you would march against the government to strive for, right? That makes sense. That is a thing that I stand very much with. That is a good thing to do. This makes it seem like the beginning of extremism, which, okay, yes, Kace is an extremist, and he's manipulating the situation, but that kind of does a disservice to this Omnic perspective. That they are mistreated. Yeah, again, why this series disappoints me so much is that it does do some things that I like in ways, but then it kind of feels, because it's such a nuanced situation, and they don't end up delving into it as much as I feel that they probably should, it kind of makes it feel like a bit of a shallower representation of that kind of social conflict. Like, I'd rather it actually sort of really showed us the understanding, like, rather than pushing characters that I liked and that seemed pretty fucking logical, sensible, and thoughtful into doctrine. This is gonna get ugly. It's already ugly. They made it ugly. What's wrong with you? Literally, what the fuck is actually wrong with you? You've shown yourself to be better than this. We will not be kept down by inferiors. I say we strike back. And doing it this way makes it, gives it these weird thing, and yes, obviously he needs to be made further out as an antagonist compared to the idea of them all being one, and obviously he likes the idea of Omnic superiority, which could connect him to Null Hector, could make him Null Hector, but depends if Null Hector's goal is just the annihilation of humans rather than some sort of like a swapping of class condition. There's nothing wrong with me. The humans, they knew what killing someone like Mondatta would do to us. Yes, and have you maybe even thought, Iggy, that not all the humans would do that? Like, a very specific group of humans might do that for a reason. Like, you should know that extremism is loud minorities, right? Mondatta preached peace, and they shot him, lady. Yeah, and if you want to live up to Mondatta, then you don't start thinking like this. If you want to honor what he thought, if you ever believed any of it, which you seemingly did pretty strongly, and you were seemingly one of the most sort of human sympathetic Omnics that we had, this logic just doesn't feel like it makes sense to me. It feels like she's being overwhelmed by this broad doctrine that doesn't actually mean anything. Like, they've presented her as more thoughtful and more encompassing than this, to me. So for her to become so reductive, these two panels, I just don't want to talk about them. I hate them so much. And they shot him, lady. Let's find Tracer. Maybe she knows what happened. Kace said Tracer would not stand up for us. He said she would choose them over us. And that's exactly what she did. When? Please? Literally, when? Kace said Tracer would not stand up for us. You've seen multiple examples of Tracer standing up for you and your kind, even up to the point of she blinked out of the way of the bullet that killed Mondatta. I don't know how fighting an assassin is not standing up for you. I don't know how, like, Mondatta seeing the help that she was trying to bring to the underground, and the fact that she has actually gotten parts for the underground. Like, Mondatta approached Tracer. She would not stand up for us. She would choose them over us. Making this about humanity and Omnics when it's just about her own life, and when she just didn't know about the bullet. Again, making it about the bullet could have made it a bit more interesting. Making it an actual choice that Tracer made, and that she was having this conversation with Iggy, that, yeah, you did choose. I did. Fuck, I did. Shit. What does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean? Holy shit, what does that mean? That's an interesting fucking dilemma. We'll just skip over, fuck it. Winston. His packages are the only connection to Overwatch I have left. Parts to keep me from fading into oblivion. Again. Never mind that you've been gaining huge actual purpose here, and that the whole Overwatch giving life purpose thing is kind of Winston's story arc. I like that they're giving you this expansion, Tracer, but I don't like that it's been done before and that it's kind of ignoring the situation at hand. Really wish you were here, mate. Lena, it's Omnics in King's Row. They've called in special ops. Lena, your accelerator, because they've kind of forgotten to remind us properly that it got damaged in her fight against Widowmaker. Like, that might be in this chapter. It's not really shown. I'll fix it when I get back. See, just because it comes up at the end, but it's just it's a tiny little detail that I assume because of the pacing, because of the page limit of each comic, they haven't had the time to fill in these more incidental details, or they need us to remember the other things that we know, that yes, her accelerator got broken, and it also means they don't have as much time to flesh out the actual stuff as they probably needed. Whoever started this knew they were inciting the Omnics to respond. Mondatta represented the Omnics' hope for equality. If someone killed my hope, I would fight back too. Stop. Yeah, stop a sec. I mean, yeah, like, pointing out that Mondatta was easily the best assassination target, well done. And yes, some understanding with the Omnics, good. Again, sorta duh. I get to an extent why there is protest, at least on this level of representing Omnic oppression. But again, this whole riot would feel... It's not a riot again. I keep calling it such. It's not. They make it a riot. That's what's so broken about it. This protest, it doesn't feel like it has an aim or a cause. It feels just like bubbling anger. And I think the Omnics deserve being represented better than that, if that makes any sense. If it was Talon that ordered Widowmaker to pull the trigger on Mondatta, what? The people that... I don't understand this. No, they're not the only ones responsible for this chaos. But this is the chaos Talon wants. I guess this is them trying to show Tracer figuring out that Null Sector are involved. But, I mean, Talon that ordered it to be done, it kind of does also present the, like, oh, what if an anti-Omnic human group was the one involved? Yeah, I don't understand what or why they sort of want to do this when we know what Null Sector is going to do going forward, and yeah, just doesn't seem necessary, exactly. It's explaining something that we kind of just know. Prepare the Sonic Pulse. Now this is dark. This is assumedly Vishkar technology, given Lucio's dad making their Sonic stuff. These Omnics are going to get hurt. Lady at least is sticking to it, and they could definitely have done what they do with Lady better as well. Jesus. That's a sonic pulse. We need to move the crowd. Lady! Lady! Separate. Destroy the machine! I do like this. He's definitely given the portrayal of the big bad and the red sort of desaturated backgrounds and stuff. And yeah, modern day sci-fi riot control, even though this actually kind of exists to an extent today, I think. To an extent, right? Maybe it is specially designed because it works better against Omnics, because the average Omnic isn't going really... They're not really going to care much about, average riot control gear. Like, Omnics, as on the whole, are generally just going to be physically stronger than humans. So they kind of need, in massive bunny ears, this for the possibility of Omnic uprising again, I guess. But for both sides to be inciting such violence does a disservice to the real-life examples of this, where a just cause is usually more so actually devalued by the responding force rather than itself. Just all feels like it's shitting on its own cause, which maybe that's the point, but also then it kind of feels that like that's shitting on Omnic oppression overall, and it just doesn't feel like it's getting to the point it's trying to make exactly as well as possible. The representation of, like, police violence and what it can actually do, yeah, that's good, and it's obviously very topical, right? And that's kind of a good cause that they could be vocally, like, as one, unitedly protesting about. Again, like, if they've come to this idea that, yeah, the government brought Mondatta here, because why did the government allow Mondatta here when they hate Omnics so much? Do you know? It makes sense for them, and it makes sense for the Omnics to come to, oh, the government invited him here so they could assassinate him with an outside assassin. That, oh, it's not our fault. Yeah, we see through your shit. Which would be a very logical way for them to understand this and then to enact going forward into a protest, right? This bit here. Everyone get back. Iggy, don't stop. Face them. Destroy them. Lady? I kind of like this pose. I also kind of don't. It kind of looks kind of dumb. As does this. It kind of really sucks the weight and gravity out of the situation. Kaboom. Back to the underworld. Lady, please everyone be okay. It was the pulse. They fired it with her this close. We have to get out of here. We have to get her to the underworld. Iggy, wait. She's gone. So, Lady, for no apparent reason, just runs up to the thing and gets zapped and dies. Really weird, underwhelming way to show Omnic death. Sorry. That's kind of anime for just looking sick or ill. And wait for it to just be just an inconsequent. It just happens. No lady, like, going to save a human who got trapped out in front of it. To actually show the Omnic human message that Lady was still embodying and that can then speak back to Iggy. And so what if Iggy had actually managed to get to Lady to try and save her, and Tracer jumps in the way and pulls Iggy out of the way, leaving Lady behind, again becoming actually directly responsible, not indirectly, directly responsible through a decision that Tracer made for an Omnic death. Have the conflict be real. But obviously they don't, and Iggy and Tracer just immediately, Iggy's just immediately, again, possibly through the emotional reaction to possible death, the extreme circumstances at hand, she ignores the fact that she's multiple pages ago just been there like Tracer has abandoned her, she doesn't want to help her, she doesn't care about us. In this instance, I'd be like, get off my dead friend. If that was the attitude that I had pertained from as Iggy from earlier in the chapter, I would be there like, don't you touch my friend, get the fuck away from me. You again couldn't do anything, and I don't know why you're here. So as far as concerned, you're still with them. If that's the kind of logic that you're pertaining from earlier, then that would make sense here. This here just feels like they've gone, yeah, we know that the conflict that we set up earlier in the chapter was really artificial and didn't actually matter, wasn't actually a real conflict, so we're just going to brush over it here. Because they do, they just brush over it into what is actually, personally, a much better scene. And what could have been a much better way for Iggy and Tracer to actually articulate a conflict, but it gets brought into more general, over-generalized doctrine, right? Again, there's bits of this that I like, and then it disappoints me that it's come off the back of such a vacuous first half of this chapter. That this scene kind of immediately goes, yeah, the conflict that Iggy and Tracer actually had, like earlier, yeah, that wasn't real conflict, we know that. Here's some kind of actual conflict, kind of. You'll see. Mondatta taught us that we are all one. When an Omnic dies, the whole of us are that much smaller. And this is actually kind of an interesting piece of lore here, and what she does with it is an incredible expansion on Omnic culture. When one of us ceases to be, a part of us ceases to be. We hold on to what we've lost. We keep it close to remind us of the part of us we have lost. To remind us of what was once, of who we are. That's fucking cool! That's such an awesome, like, artistic expression of what Omnic kind mean to each other. And what Lady meant to Iggy. That's actually pretty cool. That's an incredible ritual as far as concerned. And it ties a lot back to the idea of Aurora, as we'll come to now. Iggy, I'm so sorry. That was a beautiful ceremony. And you're just welcome here now, are you? Lady was the only Omnic I ever met who loved music as much as me. She loved American 70s rock, reverb, drum solos. I guess now that she's gone, I don't have to listen to the Rolling Stones anymore. Except that's all I can hear in my head now. You don't understand, Tracer. You can't. When one of you is gone, another comes into the world. We are all we have. 2 of us are gone now. And what are the humans doing? Waging war against Omnics. This is really cool. I like a lot of this, except for the fact that it again kind of ignores individuality. When one of you is gone, when one of any of us is gone, that person is gone. Yes, humans perpetuate, and this is a cool expansion that after Aurora's transcendence, there have been like a limited number of Omnics, which personally would be, if you've watched my recent video on how the iris works and what transcendence means, I think that transcendence for most Omnics that could achieve it, which won't be too many, it will be different. Aurora's first transcendence was inspired by a specific desire. For more Omnics, for us to have a multiplicative interpretation of the world so that we can help make each other. She sacrificed her body and her own singular mind to grant minds to all Omnics. There have obviously seemingly been some Omnics that have attained their own version of sentience in the meantime. Whether they can then subsequently link into the iris or how that exactly works, not entirely sure, but someone like Zenyatta, his transcendence theoretically wouldn't be influenced by the same desire. It also has the iris to back it up, so it doesn't have to sacrifice his body and mind. Zenyatta's aim isn't to make more Omnics. It's to bring all into the iris, to bring humans and Omnics together, to ignore doctrine and see how reality actually works, how unity can actually be achieved. Zenyatta's transcendence isn't going to just, with that desire, make more Omnics and him disappear. Because that doesn't make sense, that's not what he wanted. But when you have a character like Iggy, who's making the very distinct point that there are a limited number of Omnics, if a character like Iggy were ever able to access the iris, and yeah, you know that that's what I think is coming from this. And I even have a very specific methodology for the specific conduit that she would use to channel the iris, right? Her aim would be to replicate Aurora's first transcendence, because that's what her desire is leading to here. Iggy wants there to at least be a way for Omnics to perpetuate. Like, if she became the sort of second step in transcendence, in that she allows Omnics to procreate, or to create more Omnics again, or to pass sentience from two Omnics into a new vessel to create a new actual offspring. That's cool as fuck, right? But that also means that her transcendence is different. Will it be limited by the sacrifice of her own body? I don't think so. I think that there's tons of Omnics that would agree with that desire. The Iris would have her back. The will of many would be able to actually allow Iggy to allow that to happen. I think that's a really fucking cool character arc to work from here, because I want to see more fucking Iggy, I'm afraid. And I think this is really interesting. And I'm glad that this has solidified the connection back to Aurora. But, moving on to Kace, and actually, some real genuinely explained conflict. This, again, is actually pretty fucking good. He calls her the fuck out. Waging war against Omnics. It has always been, since we came to Enlightenment, humans have waged war against us. Yes, he's being general here, as I'm not as fussed on the generality of this point, because it kind of ignores the individuality. This is kind of actually kind of a bit more all-encompassing, that all Omnics will have experienced a war against their enlightenment. That much I understand. And that's actually kind of fair, at least in my understanding of things. Like, obviously, I'm coming from a not within the Omnic perspective, or its various analogous existences in the real world, right? I'm speaking as this from more the human's perspective, I guess, in the sort of a situation, if you will. It doesn't have to be war. Whoever started this, we can stop it. We can stop it, right? Says you, Overwatch soldier. Was that what you fought for? To stop wars? Or to kill Omnics? I think that's actually a pretty fair fucking question. You fought for humanity. And yet you want us to all be equal, yet you've killed countless of my brethren who were fighting against human oppression when they gained sentience. Like, they decided to go to war, whether the Omniums decided to go to war sentiently, if that's a word, and pushed the Omnics to do so. But then if the Omnics were pushed to do so and they had no sentience or intent behind their war, then why would you feel sorry for that? So it makes it kind of clear that the war is centered around Omnic enlightenment, as far as concerned. Whether that is, like, passed on from the Omniums, and that's what actually caused this, or whether it has something specifically to do with Aurora, and how she fits into the timeline, because that's actually kind of dubious given other bits of information. I fought for Mondatta's freedom. You fought for them. Admittedly, yeah, her time in Overwatch only actually came since the Uprising. She doesn't actually have anything to do with the original Omnic crisis. Which, are we ignoring that? Like, I like that this is used as a stopping point, though. You were part of Overwatch. Part of what you existed for was to kill Omnics, no matter how you frame it. You fought for them. You fought for what humanity wanted. Mondatta was deemed acceptable. Omnics actually living for themselves and fighting for their right to be respected as equals. You fought against that. You have already chosen a side, Tracer. Yeah. That's good. I actually like this. And that's what disappoints me about the whole sort of intervening time, that there was no tangible conflict to build us to this point. It was an intangible, like, misconception that this scene then just sort of ignores because it realizes that it was pointless. I like that these two are left in some sort of impasse. That there is some more to come from these two here. That it's not purely conflict, it's a conundrum. I like this much of it, at least. I don't think I can say much more than that. And I like what Kace does. I think that he actually represents, finally, a good point. Tracer does have the stuff to fix up the underground, so I think providing it in some way can show that she's still trying to make amends. There'll be a little link through here, but yeah, for now she's not welcome here. Although this kind of undoes that immediately, I think. First Russia, now London. It's starting again. It's... no, no, no! To be continued. Ominous, hooded Omnic! Tracer struggles to plan her next move after a friend patches up her Chronal Accelerator. So this is a friend? In the underworld, an assassination attempt is made on Kace, further fueling the Omnic rebellion. Who attempts that assassination will be very important into figuring out why that's an issue and who wants him dead, whether it is the British government being there like, yeah, we're just not having Kace around anymore. That would actually play pretty well into the sort of abuse of power that this whole thing is sort of playing off. But for it to again be Talon would then speak to more of like null sectors wanting for Kace to become sort of like a martyr or something like that. Like, yeah, they obviously took out the other Omnic who's speaking up against all this. No, no, no. This is the time for rebellion. So at least they're like, the political machinations are kind of interesting, I guess. If it is null sector killing off Kace, I imagine that it's not them killing him off and them inducting him into the fold. Because Kace is like a general of null sector, underneath like null Hector, if you will. I think that could be pretty interesting. But there's also obviously the consideration that Kace is null Hector and he's using this as an excuse for an identity swap, or he's got some kind of crazy connection again to the iris, allows him to transfer his soul between different bodies, or there's a power from the iris that null Hector has, or Kace has, because they both have weird tubular elements to their character design. Like, if either of them has an ability, almost as the inverse of Zenyatta, that they want to physically induct all Omnics into the iris, and their tubes allow them to assimilate Omnic souls, if null Hector were to turn up and be there like, Kace, join the brethren. Join my own insulated hive mind, the shadow of the iris. What, do you know? Like, that could be pretty fucking cool. I'm going to keep pushing the iris powers because the iris is Nen. Fight me. You won't win. And finally, our mysterious stranger in the hood. There's only like a few characters who I think this could be if this is the friend. Like, we don't see any legs, which could mean it's Zenyatta floating, which would be relatively interesting, especially like as she at least has a connection to Mondatta. So it could be Zen, although the eye color is maybe not right and the face shape isn't exactly correct either. And as far as Overwatch 2 shows us, Genji goes to meet Zenyatta and he's still in India? So it really depends on the timeline of this. Like how this ties into Stone by Stone. This is obviously earlier, I think, in the Overwatch timeline than Stone by Stone exactly, but yeah, Zen being in London in the aftermath of his brother's death could actually make kind of sense. And it'd be nice to tie that in, like this is where he is before he journeys to India, and I now must embark on the pilgrimage of Aurora. Something like that. It could be an interesting way to do it. It could be Echo. It could be Echo disguised as another Omnic, as a random Omnic, right? And then that could be a mysterious friend that is just like, that fixes her up next issue and then goes off on her own way, but I don't see why. If she were then to turn into Echo, it wouldn't make much sense for Echo turning up in 0 Hour and everyone being like, oh, Echo! Because Tracer would know that Echo was coming, and, do you know? It's probably not Echo. It being Null Hector would be very interesting. Like, if Null Hector is a different character from Kace, although the eye colour, again, I think doesn't exactly carry, because I think his are red. It'd be kind of interesting if Null Hector were to fix her up and be there like, keep trying. You just keep making it worse. So yeah, there's no other distinct Omnics, I think, like humanoid ones, that would work as the friend. Zenyatta or Echo are my two more distinct guesses. Like, it could be Iggy if Iggy had been sort of buying into the whole doctrine thing to keep Tracer away from the harmful effects of the extremist Omnics. But I mean, she kind of she was very happy for her to be here at, like, a funeral for an Omnic, so probably not. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here, do you know? So yeah, that was London Calling issue 3. It kind of hurts. This was difficult to read. I like where it's finally brought us into what feels like an actual, slightly more tangible, understandable conflict between Kace and Tracer, and the kind of rather artificial conflict that we did have between Tracer and Iggy has at least been superseded by an understandable differential that's, again, not exactly conflict. It's sort of like an impasse. Man, I hate seeing this face. She's so... I want them to do Iggy justice. Like, I like this character so fucking much, man. Maybe that's my own proclivities at play, but, yeah, she deserves better than what she got given, as far as concerned. Kace is finally coming into some form of his own. Tracer's kind of here. She hasn't gotten a chance to fully expand on her side of the story to Iggy. Like, again, the conflict doesn't feel like it's understood. It feels like it's sitting in a mire of bullshit, right? Which is fine. That's for them to push past in the next few chapters. I really hope I'm right about Iggy and her journey towards her own transcendence, especially if she's to find that trying to replicate Aurora's transcendence doesn't actually achieve anything for her as an individual. It's not something that the rest of the Iris can back, or something that she can actually channel her own will to enough that she comes to a different conclusion. She makes her own transcendence. I think that would be really interesting. But as a motivation to bring her into the story and to allow her to access the Iris to give her crazy superpowers that allows her to be a hero. Because, yeah, another, like, a punk rock Omnic support. Yeah, man. I'm all about that. I'm all about that shit. I think that's a really interesting way to bring her into the story. And then it allows, just inherently through how it works, especially if you take my framework of how the Iris works, her own cause then becomes the framework for how her goals can be met going forward. And whether she's right or wrong about what kind of transcendence she wants to achieve. I think achieving her own transcendence speaks more to her being an individual, to her being herself. And that speaks for all Omnics. That all Omnics who can channel the Iris, any form of transcendence that they can meet, I think being different from Aurora's speaks more to them being actual individuals within this greater whole. That they're reflections of greater attitudes, but directed by individual will. I think that this issue does a lot for us, but I just hate that it came off the back of a conflict that felt so artificial, and then especially a further window into conflict that feels really stilted or could have been executed on much better to actually provide an actual proper dilemma here. So yeah, sad to see Lady go. She really kept up this sort of ideology that I'm sure that Iggy is going to come back to an extent. Even if she doesn't fully go back there, I think that she's going to serve a nice balance between characters like Kace and Zenyatta. I think that she's going to be able to show the more nuanced middle ground between the two. Yeah, which is why I think she's really deserving of an important place going forward. But moving forward, as said much earlier in this video, I do think we might see some more of Widowmaker in the next 2 issues. We may even conclude with the fight over the Doomfist Gauntlet somehow, although I think that would detract from the actual issue at hand. This story is about resolving Tracer and Iggy's conflict and giving Iggy a resolute motive going forward, I think. Kace as well, Null Hector, and to set up the sort of climate of human Omnic tension in the Omnic world when we lead into Overwatch 2. So yeah, issue 3, good try. You brought it back a bit at the end, I suppose. You gave us a cliffhanger of all things. But yeah, this series as a whole has just disappointed me because there's so much in it that I think is actually pretty good. And it regularly gets let down by really just glaring elements that I can't push past to actually enjoy this. So the reason I had to wait a few days to make this video is because I had some complex feelings about this story. There they are. I really hope you enjoyed them, and I hope you can see now why I feel that this story is lacking in certain aspects. But with that, that's more than enough out of me. Thank you for staying with me, friends. I've been Euclidean Vision, the very emotional support right now. Take care of yourselves out there, teammates, and may the glorious light of Best Girl shine within you. One day.